Clouds of Torah presents Who is Isaiah 9 and 6 referring to? Please subscribe if you have not already. Hit the like button as we get into this next lesson. So the context of Isaiah 9 and 6. Before we can address Isaiah 9 and 6, we must discuss what is leading up to this verse and what happened after. The New Testament is known to cherry pick verses and strip away the context so the verse can be applied to Jesus. The false fulfillment citations of Matthew chapter 2, right? It's an excellent source to see how this was done repeatedly, and I show how all the fulfillment citations are false and deceptive in this one chapter. The PowerPoint is available on my YouTube page, and the book is available on Amazon.com. Context of Isaiah chapter 8 through 9. Like I said, what's going on before and after plays a big part of Isaiah 9 verse 6 and after. So let's get into some of the background. Isaiah 8, 7 through 10. Now therefore, behold, the Lord brings over them the waters of the river, strong and mighty, the king of Assyria in all his glory. Remember the king of Assyria throughout this lesson, or the multiple kings of Assyria, because they had more than one king over a time frame. He will go up and over all of his channels and go over all his banks. He will pass through Judah. He will overflow and pass over. He will reach up to the neck, and stretching out of his wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. That name sound familiar? It should. Be shattered, O you peoples, and be broken in pieces. Give ear, all you from far countries. Gird yourself, but be broken in pieces. Gird yourself, but be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. Or, if you was to translate that, again, O Emmanuel. Why is Emmanuel being spoken of in Isaiah chapter 8, 7 through 10, when you are told by Christianity that Emmanuel is Jesus? Do you see Jesus in any of the context of Isaiah 8, 7 through 10? No, you do not. It's referring to a time frame concerning the king of Assyria passing through Judah. But it will not stand. Why? Because God is with us, or O Emmanuel. Keep that in the back of your mind. Continuing with the context of Isaiah 8, chapter 8 through chapter 9. Isaiah 8, 16 through 21. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, and I will wait on the Lord, who hides his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Here am I and the children whom the Lord has given me. We are for signs and wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts. Remember in Isaiah chapter 7, somebody was to be a sign. Why does it say, I and the children whom the Lord has given me? We are for signs. Who was this referring to? This is Isaiah and his children, who dwells in Mount Zion. And when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards, who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. They will pass through it hard pressed and hungry, and it shall happen when they are hungry that they will be enraged and curse their king and their God and look upward. So, again, here am I and the children whom the Lord has given me. We are for signs. So the baby in Isaiah 7:14 is in the same league as Isaiah when he says, we are for signs. Why we? Is this the time frame of the New Testament? No, it is not. Keep that in the back of your mind. A continuation. If you notice, Isaiah 9 verse 1 starts out saying, nevertheless. It's like an ongoing conversation that was started in Isaiah chapter 8, but continues into chapter 9. Remember, there were no original page breaks in the scroll. So when we see a continuation and it says, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who was distressed. Who is this talking about? Well, you have to go back to the end of Isaiah chapter 8 and read it. And then when it connects to chapter 9, it will make sense. So when it says, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed. Well, who is distressed? This is concerning Israel, concerning what Isaiah was speaking about, concerning that king of Assyria it was talking about in Isaiah chapter 8, okay? So Isaiah 9, 1 through 2. Nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, as when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward more heavily oppressed her. Who oppressed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali? This is the question, right? By the way of the sea beyond the Jordan in Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. Most people that were raised in Christianity will associate this with Matthew chapter 4. What you're going to see is how Matthew ripped this out of context. He omitted words, and he started his quote in a very odd place. And we're going to see why he omitted words and starts his quote in a very odd place. Before we get to Matthew chapter 4, we're going to continue with Isaiah 9, 3 through 5. You have multiplied the nation and increased its joy. They rejoice before you according to the joy of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you have broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder and the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every warrior sandal from the noisy battle and garments rolled in blood will be used for burning and fuel of fire. Now, if Isaiah 9, 1 through 5 so far, we read from the beginning of 9, 1 through 5, not even to mention we started off in chapter 8. But thus far, does any of these verses have anything to do with the New Testament? No, they do not. So how can we just jump in Isaiah 9 and 6 and assume this has to be referring to Jesus? And then after Isaiah 9, 6 and 7, then it goes back to speaking about something completely different. It doesn't make sense. So let's continue. Isaiah chapters 8 through 9. Who was in the darkness? So I'm going to be going back and forth between 8 and 9. And I'm even going to bring up 7 a little bit just to put in the context of what's going on with these chapters and why they're all tied together. Even Isaiah chapter 10 is included in this. So let's deal with it. Isaiah 8 and 22. Then they will look to the earth and see trouble and darkness, gloom of anguish, and they will be driven into darkness. Who is the they in Isaiah 8 and 22? Isaiah 9 and 2. The people who walked in darkness, again, have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. So we see way back in Isaiah 8 and 22, there's people who see trouble and darkness and they're driven into darkness. Isaiah 9, we see the people who walked in darkness. But like I asked before, is there any connection between Isaiah 8 and 9, 1 through 5, that have anything to do with the New Testament? The answer is no. So now let's look at what Matthew did. Matthew 4:16. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and upon them who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. Matthew has gone into Isaiah, quoted a part of the verse, right? But look at where he starts. Let's go to Isaiah 9 and 1. Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Matthew don't tell you about that part. And afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. I'm going to show you how Matthew is not going to tell you about that either. All he did was talk about a people who sat in darkness. If you read in the New Testament, you would assume it's the people in the time frame of Jesus. But I'm going to show you that this is not the case. So now let's deal with Matthew 4 in context. Let's do chapter 4, verse 12 through 16. We're going to back it up a little bit, and then we're going to show what's going on. Verse 12, Matthew 4 and 12. Now when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he departed to Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. So this is a partial quote from Isaiah chapter 9, but it is stripped of context in the historical context and applied to an entirely different scenario in the New Testament. Now, he's saying that what Jesus was dealing with, right, after leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea, the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled. So it's saying he did all these things according to a prophecy, something that had not yet happened, so that he could fulfill it, right? So let's deal with what actually is going on here. First, he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. We don't see that in Matthew's quote. Why? Because Isaiah 9 and 1 says, nevertheless, the dimness shall not be as such as was in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea, beyond Jordan and Galilee of the nations, right? All Matthew tells you about is the Galilee of the nations, and I'm going to show you that. So when Christians hear the word Galilee, they automatically, well, most of them automatically jump into a New Testament mind frame because we hear of Galilee, Jesus of Galilee. There's movies about Galilee, right? Here's the situation. In Acts 5:37, after this man rose up, Judas of Galilee, in the days of the taxing. This is when Jesus was a baby, right? And drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. This sounds just like the story of Jesus. Because if I didn't tell you this verse, and I said, Jesus of Galilee, and I said, drew away much people after him, he perished, and as many as obeyed him were dispersed, and I said, who was that talking to? 10 out of 10 Christians are going to say, oh, that must be talking about Jesus. It was Jesus of Galilee. People followed him. He died or perished, and people who obeyed him were scattered or dispersed, right? No. So you don't realize, being raised as a Christian because your pastor doesn't tell you, that the story of Jesus is not unique to him. There were so many other people who came and got followings, were killed, and their disciples or followers were dispersed or scattered, just like Jesus, right? Now, Isaiah 8 and 7. Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria, and all his glory, and he shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks. Now, let's go back up to Isaiah 9 and 1. When it says that they will be afflicted, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, right? If they're going to be afflicted, who is afflicting them? The king of Assyria. We're going to see the king of Assyria being a problem throughout the book of Isaiah concerning chapters Isaiah 7 and all the way through chapters Isaiah 10 in this specific context of what's going on in Isaiah 9 and 6. So I'm not trying to confuse you, but you have to realize that the king of Assyria plays through this whole scenario because Isaiah 9 and 1 is telling you somebody's being afflicted. Somebody's being afflicted. But when Matthew quotes it, he doesn't tell you anything about that. All he does is tell you about the Galilee of the nations, the land of Naphtali, the land of Zebulun, and that there's a light, and people are told that this light is Jesus, okay? So, walk with me. Matthew edited Isaiah 9:1. Let's go. Matthew 4:12 through 16. Now, when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he departed into Galilee. Remember Galilee, Judas of Galilee, like I just showed. So people hear these catchphrases, they say, oh, this must be referring to the New Testament, right? No. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali. Remember Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. The problem is, that's not how Isaiah 9:1 starts. So, Matthew 4:15, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nation, or the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. Okay, but Matthew edited this verse. This is a major red flag. Here's why. The words, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, and when at first he lightly esteemed, is missing. All those words, Matthew, he omitted all those. He started in verse 15, the land of Zebulun, right? Then, and it says, and afterward more heavily oppressed her is missing. Why did he take these two sections of the verses out? Because you have to know who heavily oppressed her. Was it the Romans or was it the king of Assyria? Right? When it says, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her was distressed, who is distressing them? Was it the Romans or the king of Assyria? You see, Matthew had to edit those words or omit them because he would have to explain why is he choosing the time frame of when the king of Assyria is oppressing Israel to try to apply it to the New Testament time of Jesus. He doesn't do that. He just says, oh, this was spoken by the prophet Isaiah, but he omits the context and the historical time frame of what's going on. Go and read Isaiah chapter 9, 1 through 2, and then go read Matthew 4, 12 through 16 and see what words are missing. So again, Matthew edited Isaiah 9, 1 through 2. Isaiah 9, 1 through 2. Let's do it again. Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be as such as in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted. After the word afflicted is the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. That's where Matthew picks it up in verse 15 of Matthew 4, right? That's where he picks it up. Then when it says the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously and afflicted her. If you go down the land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, right? The words and afterward did more grievously afflict her are missing. This whole part right here is missing. This everything in yellow up here is missing out of Matthew 4. Why did he omit all this stuff? Because he had to talk about who grievously afflicted her and who lightly afflicted these people. Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be as such as was in her vexation. Where is this in Matthew 4? Where is and afterward did more grievously afflict her in Matthew 4? It's not there. Why? What happened to Midian? The context of Isaiah 9, 1 through 12 is ignored, and only the beginning verses are quoted in Isaiah 9, 1 through 2. And of course, a Christian will quote you Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 all day. But everything else surrounding that chapter, they won't touch when they try to apply it to Jesus. Why? Let's read why. Isaiah 9, 3 through 4. You have multiplied the nation and increased his joy. They rejoice before you according to the joy of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you have broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. So again, who's the rod of his oppressor as in the day of Midian? Why the day of Midian? Because Israel fought with Midian back in the day and defeated them. We see this in Numbers 31 and 2. Take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward, you shall be gathered to your people. So Moses was told to go and fight Midian before he died. Judges 8 and 22. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. So we see 2 times Israel fought Midian. So when it says in Isaiah 9:4, the rod of his oppressor, right? This yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian, is telling you that they will be broken as in the day of Midian, meaning they will be defeated as in the day of Midian. What does this have to do with anything in the New Testament? Nothing. That's why Matthew has to ignore all the context of Isaiah 9:1-5 leading up to verse 6, right? That's why a Christian won't touch that. And that's why Matthew chapter 4, verses 12-16 omits anything that has to do with the oppressor or somebody who was vexing Israel, because it would lead back to the king of Assyria, because he's the one who was defeated as in the day of Midian, like Isaiah 9:4 tells you. So let's keep going. Isaiah 9:12. The Syrians before and the Philistines behind, and they shall devour Israel with an open mouth. For all this his anger is turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. So we see the Syrians or Assyria are the ones who are a problem in the book of Isaiah chapter 9. Before and after Isaiah 9:6-7, right? So the context of it all is going to make way more sense once you know how to understand this chapter. Excuse me. 2 Kings 17:6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried away Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. So let's deal with this. Who was oppressing, right? Who was oppressing? The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. That Matthew omitted. Remember, he omitted that part. He just starts out saying the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but he don't tell you that they were being oppressed, right? Assyria was the oppressor. Matthew edits that part. Why? Assyria is not a threat to Israel in the New Testament. It is the Romans, right? So when we go back and look at the historical context of Isaiah 9, we see Assyria in Isaiah 9:12, right? They shall devour Israel, right? We see in 2 Kings 17:6, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, right? They were the ones being oppressed. They're the ones who dealt with Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Because when you go into the New Testament, you really only see Judah, Levi, and Benjamin being the prominent names used in the New Testament. You see somebody from, I want to say, the tribe of Asher, right? And maybe one other tribe mentioned, but as a majority, as a whole, the 10 tribes were missing. That's why it's called the lost tribes of Israel, right? Because the king of Assyria took them away from Israel. This is the whole context of Isaiah, talking about this king of Assyria was a problem. And we see the king of Assyria carried away Israel into Assyria, right? This whole context has nothing to do with the New Testament. If we back it up, we see the king of Assyria way back in Isaiah chapter 7. Okay, they besieged Ahaz but could not overcome him, right? 2 Kings 16:5. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to make war, and they besieged Ahaz but could not overcome him. This is the same story in Isaiah chapter 7. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, king of Assyria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to make war against it, but could not prevail against it. Same situation, right? Now, why couldn't they overtake Israel? This powerful king, right? Isaiah 8:10, take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the word, but it will not stand. Why? For God is with us. The baby that was born was the sign to let them know God is with us, Emmanuel. So Emmanuel had to be present in the time of Ahaz for him to recognize this will not stand. because they're trying to defeat Israel. It says they warred against it, but could not prevail against them. They besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. And why couldn't they? Because the Most High said it will not stand in Isaiah 8 and 10. Why? Emmanuel, for God is with us. So, again, the king of Assyria is the problem. This has nothing to do with the Romans, is why Matthew could not tell you who was oppressing the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. He had to omit it. There was no other choice. Where are the Assyrians in the New Testament? Let's do it again. Isaiah 7 and 1. And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Isaiah 7, 4-5. And say to him, take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and the son of Remaliah, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have plotted evil against you, saying, right? They plotted to take over Israel, to overthrow Judah, right? Not Israel, the northern kingdom, but the tribe of Judah, right? Specifically, because we know there was two kingdoms at that time. So I don't want to confuse nobody. Isaiah 7 and 8. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. So we see a time frame of when these things are supposed to take place already in Isaiah 7 and 8. We ain't even got to jump fast. We ain't got to fast forward too much. We see it right here in Isaiah 7 and 8. These things are not going to happen, right? So again, where are the Assyrians in the New Testament? Isaiah 8 and 6. For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, they go softly and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son. So we see Rezin in the time frame of Isaiah 8, right? We see Rezin being a problem in that time frame. Isaiah 9 and 11. So right after Isaiah 9, 6-7, we see Rezin coming up again. So this gives you a historical context of who was the problem and why Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 was for that time frame and not a future prophecy. Isaiah 9 and 11. Therefore the Lord shall settle up the adversaries of Rezin against him and join his enemies together. Why is the Most High worried about Rezin if Isaiah 9 and 6 is about Jesus? Yeah, I did a little bit of silence so you can sit there and think about that, right? If Rezin is all the way back in Isaiah chapter 7 and 8 and 9, right? How is Isaiah 9 referring to a future king if he's an adversary against Israel in that time frame? What did that have to do with the New Testament? Nothing. I'm going to repeat this one more time, just so it'll sit in real good. Assyria seems to be an ongoing problem in Isaiah chapters 7 through 9, all the way through, even in 10, but specifically. And it came to pass, Isaiah 7 and 1, and it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, that Rezin, king of Syria, okay, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Isaiah 8 and 7. Now therefore, behold, the Lord brings up over them the waters of the river, strong and mighty, the king of Assyria, in all his glory. He went up over all his channels and go over all his banks. So again, all the way from Ahaz, all the way in Isaiah 7 and 1, all the way through Isaiah chapter 9, we're going to see the Syrians being a problem. Isaiah 9 and 12. The Syrians before and the Philistines behind, and they shall devour Israel with an open mouth. For all this his anger is turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. His hand is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. So the Most High is upset with Israel. And this is why the Syrians and the Philistines will devour Israel with an open mouth. This is who is doing the oppressing, clearly telling you in Isaiah chapter 9. But when Matthew chapter 4 quotes Isaiah 9, he omits who the oppressor is. He omits who is the one that is doing anything to the land of Zebulun and the Naphtali, and why are they in the darkness? The New Testament wants you to think they're in the darkness because they don't have Jesus. That is completely deceptive. Questions for those who quote Matthew 4:12 through 16. Isaiah 9 and 4. For thou hast broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. Ask them, who is the oppressor and what happened in the day of Midian? And does that have anything to do with the New Testament? Ask them. Because if this verse is not about Rome, what does this verse have to do with Jesus? You cannot jump into the time of Jesus at your convenience. Does only Isaiah 9, 6 through 7 have anything to do with Jesus? But the rest of the chapter is about the days of Hezekiah. Ask them, does that have to do anything with the days of Hezekiah? Isaiah chapter 9. Or is only 6 and 7 concerning Jesus? Is Isaiah 9, 1 through 12 have anything to do with Jesus? Omitting verses 6 and 7? Let's skip verses 6 and 7. Let's assume for the Christian's sake that's about Jesus. What is the rest of the chapter about in the context? In Isaiah 9 and 12, when it says the Syrians before and the Philistines behind, what time frame is this referring to, and what would that have to do with the New Testament? Are the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali mentioned again by Matthew? Isaiah 9 and 1. Nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, as when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward more heavily oppressed her by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan in Galilee of the Gentiles. Notice in Matthew 4:15 where he starts the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, he forgets to bring out I ain't going to say forget, he omitted the beginning of Isaiah 9 and 1, right? Then it says, he immediately goes to by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. He doesn't mention the phrase or the sentence, and afterward more heavily oppressed her. He omitted that as well. Now, what happened to Zebulun and Naphtali? 2 Kings 15:29. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth, Makkah, Jonoah, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. That's why the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali were oppressed, right? That's why they were distressed. But Matthew just basically strips the whole context, brings you the sentence, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but he doesn't tell you anything was going on with Zebulun and Naphtali. And of course, is directed to Jesus being a light to these people who are oppressed and in the dark. But he does not elaborate on any of that. And again, the king of Assyria, once again, is the problem, because he's the one who took all the land of Naphtali and carried them captive to Assyria. You see that? So this is exactly what Matthew doesn't want to tell you, because it would take out of context what he's trying to put forth in Matthew 4, saying Isaiah is quoting, he's quoting Isaiah, saying Isaiah gave a prophecy and is being fulfilled in Matthew 4 and 15, but this has nothing to do with the time frame of Jesus. So again, what happened in the day of Midian? Isaiah 9 and 4. For thou hast broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. So this is telling you that this already happened. The staff was broken, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. Judges 6:6. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Judges 6:14. Then the Lord turned to him and said, Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? So we see Israel was saved from the Midianites. So does anything in Isaiah 9:4 have anything to do with Jesus saving anybody as in the day of Midian from a physical salvation? Not a spiritual, not showing up preaching to anybody, but Gideon in the book of Judges physically saved Israel from the hand of the Midianites. You could go and read about the whole war. Gideon and the Midianites concerning Zebulun and Naphtali. So let's put some stuff in perspective. Judges 6:34-35. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Then he blew the trumpet, and the Abiezrites gathered behind him, and he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also gathered behind him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet him. Now, it's interesting that Zebulun and Naphtali were oppressed, and they're also dealing with the Midianites. That's why Isaiah 9:4 mentions Zebulun and Naphtali and Midian. Judges 7:16. Then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet into every man's hand with empty pitchers and torches inside the pitchers. Notice it says 300 men. 300 men who went out to battle. These weren't disciples or preachers. These were people who went out with a trumpet, empty pitchers, and torches. Okay, Judges 7:18. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me then also blow the trumpets on every side of the whole camp and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. A sword of the Lord and of Gideon. This is not nobody going out to preach to the Midianites. They're about to physically go and fight. Gideon's army physically fought a war. Judges 7:20-22. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers. They held the torches in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands for blowing, and they cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And every man stood in his place all around the camp, and the whole army ran and cried out and fled. When the 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the whole camp, and the army fled to Beth Acacia towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel Mahola by Tabith. So these people who went and actually fought a war pretty much really just witnessed it, but it was a physical interaction, because it says the Lord set every man's sword against his companion through the whole camp. So the Most High had these people turn on themselves, but it was a physical encounter. This was not a spiritual encounter. They didn't go up and preach to the people, okay? That's why it says the rod of his oppressor will be broken, as in the days of Midian. People physically died on a battlefield, okay? This was not no spiritual encounter as we see with everything in the New Testament. Hezekiah was physically saved from Assyria. So again, when it says the rod of the oppressor, as it will be dealt with as in the days of Midian, let's read it. 2 Kings 19:20. Then Isaiah the son of Amos sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, because you have prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. This is the word which the Lord has spoken concerning him. So again, we see Assyria, and now we see Hezekiah in the picture. Okay? 2 Kings 19:32-35. Therefore, thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria. He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor build a siege mount against it. By the way he came, by the same shall he return. And he shall not come into this city, says the Lord, for I will defend the city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. And it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses all dead. So, just like in the days of Midian, Israel had a problem, and an army who threatened them were physically killed. Nobody physically killed the Romans and saved Israel physically from the Romans, as in the day of Midian, when Zebulun and Naphtali had to deal with Assyria. They were oppressed, and then when Hezekiah came on the scene, when Assyria was threatening his kingdom, which was in Judah, because remember, Zebulun and Naphtali were carried away to Assyria, all 10 tribes. But when Judah was threatened, Hezekiah, being the son of Ahaz, the king in Isaiah chapter 7, so when you put this all together, you see Ahaz, king of Judah, was threatened by Assyria. The Most High said, it ain't going to happen. Why? Because God is with us, or Emmanuel. Hezekiah is born, becomes king. Assyria threatens them. It did not go down. The Most High sent the angel of the Lord, went out, smashed everybody. So just like in the days of Midian, if you go back and read Isaiah chapter 9, this is what we're dealing with. We don't see no historical context of Isaiah 9 jumping into the future, dealing with anything concerning the Romans. It's all about Assyria at the time and the Philistines. The northern kingdom was taken into captivity. This context has nothing to do with the New Testament. So if you want to place Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 and 7 in the lap of Jesus, saying that he's supposed to have a kingdom and all these things, then what about Isaiah chapter 9, 8 through 14? The Lord sent a word into Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel, and all the people shall know, even Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, that say in the pride and stoutness of heart, the bricks are fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will change them into cedars. Therefore the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him, and join his enemies together, the Syrians before, the Philistines behind, and they shall devour Israel with an open mouth. For all this his hand is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. For the people turneth not unto him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore the Lord will cut off from Israel head and tail, branch and rush in one day. So the northern kingdom is going to have major problems. We just read that. When it's talk about Ephraim, Ephraim was the head of all the northern tribes. Remember it said the king of Assyria went into Samaria and took everybody? If we go back up here to verse 9, it says, and all the people should know, even Ephraim and the inhabitant of Samaria, that say in the pride and stoutness of heart, right? They're so prideful, but when the king of Assyria came and took them, they couldn't do nothing about it. Right? Why is that? Verse 12, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind, and they shall devour Israel with an open mouth. This is the problem the king of Assyria was bringing to that northern tribe, those northern tribes. This context right here has nothing to do with the New Testament. So how would Isaiah 9, 1 through 5 be concerning Israel and Assyria? Skip verses 6 and 7, apply it to Jesus. Then right after that, in verse 8, Isaiah 9, 8 through 14, go right back to talking about the king of Assyria bringing problems to Israel. Doesn't make any sense. Matthew must ignore the majority of Isaiah 9, 1 through 21. But why? Because Isaiah 9, 1 through 21 is connected to Isaiah 10. These verses are not in the time frame of the New Testament. Remember, Matthew strips the beginning of of Matthew 9:1 and starts with the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, right? He doesn't deal with Isaiah 9:4, for thou hast broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. Now, why is that important? Isaiah 10:5, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. So there goes the staff and the rod and the Assyrian that's mentioned in Isaiah chapter 9, right here in Isaiah chapter 10. The rod of his oppressor, the staff of his shoulder, right here in Isaiah 10:5. The rod of my anger and the staff in their hand is my indignation. This is why Matthew chapter 4 rips the whole thing out of context, omits words, because he cannot account for the Assyrian being the problem in Isaiah chapter 9. He can't do it. You can't jump to the time of Jesus in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7, and then go back and deal with the Assyrians. It's completely out of context and deceitful. Fuel for the fire, Isaiah 9:5. For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. So, Isaiah 9:5, nothing to do with the New Testament, right? Let's jump to Isaiah 9:18 through 19. For wickedness burneth as the fire. It shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened. Remember, the people were in the darkness, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother. So again, we see the fuel of the fire in Isaiah 9:5 and Isaiah 9:18 through 19, which means they're connected. So what does Isaiah 9:5 through 19 have to do with the New Testament? Nothing. But they cherry picked verses 6 and 7 and applied them to Jesus. Very deceptive. So it may sound like I've been repeating myself, but I'm driving the point home, because the majority of Christians go with how they feel about something opposed to what they actually study. Most of them don't study. Some do. There's a lot. Actually, so there's a lot who do, but the majority are, we go to church on Sunday, we go to church on Christmas and Easter, and the rest of the year we just kind of, throw it up in the air, and we pray out of, not I'm gonna say we, but they pray out of convenience. Now, I'm not saying all Christians are like that, but the majority are. Matthew ripped Isaiah 9:1 through 2 out of context and injected Jesus into the story. Now, this is very difficult for people to stomach, right? But again, Matthew 4:12 through 16 takes Isaiah 9:1 through 2 out of context, omits sentences within the verses, and skips verses 3 through 5. And so Isaiah 9:6 through 7 is assumed to be about Jesus, though it's never quoted and ignored because its context involves Isaiah 9:1 through 7. You got to start from the beginning and go through the whole thing. I showed Isaiah 9:8 through 21 has nothing to do with the New Testament. It's all about the Assyrians and other enemies of Israel. Now we can address Isaiah 9 and 6 specifically, because we got all the surrounding context before and after to deal with. Isaiah 9 and 6, different translations. So the average Christian uses the King James Version Bible, be it 1611, Authorized King James Version, or a New King James Version. And they say a child shall be born or will be born, which will place it as a future prophecy. But this is not a prophecy. This is telling you something that already went down, because these other translations translated like that. Contemporary English Version. A child has been born for us. We have been given a son. NET Bible, for a child has been born to us, a son has been given to us. New Century Version, a child has been born to us, God has given a son to us. Young's Literal Translation, for a child hath been born to us, a son hath been given to us. Why are these all past tense? For a child shall be born and a child has been born. It's two different things. Somebody's not being honest here, and somebody has an agenda. So let's deal with the word Yalad, has been born. Genesis 4:26. A son was born. Judges 18:29. Was born. Jeremiah 20:15. Has been born. Same word right there in Isaiah 9. Was born and has been born. Past tense. Yolad. 17 occurrences. Isaiah 9:6. Why does it say is born? Why is it Strong's translate that as is born? But the same word in Genesis 4:26 says was born. 3205, 3205. Yulad, Yulad. Some people say Eli because the U can pronounce with like a E before the Y, you know. But was born, is born. What's going on here? Look at all 17 occurrences and see the only place it's translated is born is in this Strong's version, which the Christians use in Isaiah 9:6. I'm not saying only the Christians use the Strong's, but what I'm saying is when you go into the Christian Bibles, there are exceptions because I showed you exceptions on the last slide, but right here in the Strong's, for some reason, they have is born, right? Which would still be past tense. A child is born to us. In context of what's going on, you could place that in the past. If it would have said shall be, that would place it in the future. So is born is basically if I'm talking to somebody and I say my son is born, a son is born to me today. A son is born to me, which would mean he's here, right? A son is he has been born, right? If I say my son was born, of course that puts it in the past, right? But if I say my son is born, it's not really proper English to say my son is born today. But if they say, hey man, when is your son coming? I say, oh, he is born, which means it happened already. So no matter how you play with this word, it's past tense or in the present tense of the person saying it. It's not future. Was called, okay? In Isaiah 9:6, it says the child shall be called, right? That's out of the most of the King James Version. His name shall be called or will be called, right? Will be called. That's how it reads right here in Isaiah 9:6 in the Strong 7:121 when you go into it. Was called, right? Let's deal with this word kara. Another word is vayikra. This is one of the words or the titles of a book in the Tanakh. Vayikra is really the book of Leviticus. So in Genesis 16:14, it says was called in the past tense. Judges 1:17, was called, was called. So kara or vayikra is something talking about something that happened. It was called that, right? Not will be called, was called. Stone Edition Tanakh. Now in the Stone Edition Tanakh, some of the verses are off. You see this in a couple places. Their Isaiah 9:5 would be the Christian Isaiah 9:6. But there's an interesting translation on here, and let me explain. For a child has been born to us, a son given to us, and the dominion shall rest on his shoulder, And the wondrous advisor, the mighty God, eternal Father, called Hezekiah's name Sar Shalom, or Prince of Peace. So what this is telling you is that the wondrous advisor, the mighty God, and the eternal Father called Hezekiah's name Sar Shalom, or Prince of Peace. Now, Hezekiah's name is not in this verse in Isaiah chapter 9, 5, or 6, depending on your translation. It doesn't say Hezekiah anywhere. But when you know what Hezekiah means, then you can put in context of what is going on here. Now, anybody who doesn't know Hebrew is not really going to understand what's going on here. So the translation here implies the God of Israel's titles are applied before he calls Hezekiah's name the Prince of Peace, which would mean when it says the wondrous advisor, this would be God. The mighty God, this would be God. The eternal Father, this would be God. And he called Hezekiah's name Sar Shalom, or Prince of Peace. So this brings up a couple of questions. Would God be called a Prince of Peace when he is a king? No. Will God ever be called a mighty God? Yes, he's called a mighty God. Will he be called eternal? Yes, he's called eternal. Will he be called a father? Yes, he's called a father. Wondrous advisor, he has all these attributes. But we don't see the Most High being called a Prince of Peace. He's not a prince. He's a king. So it would make sense that the wondrous advisor, the mighty God, the eternal Father would call somebody else's name a Prince of Peace. So I'm going to give some examples of people's title being given before they call somebody's name something. Just so you could try to follow me of what I'm saying here, because if you don't understand how the Hebrew works, how we'll say, I call your name David, or Devon called such and such his name David. But the way the Hebrew reads is different, and I'm going to show you. Called comes before the name of the caller. In Genesis 1 and 5. Vayikra, and called Elohim. So instead of saying God called the light day, it says, and called God the light day. Genesis 3 and 20. And Adam called his wife's name, right? But in the Hebrew, Vayikra ha'adam, or and called the man or the Adam his wife's name. And actually it says Vayikra ha'adam Shem, right? Ashoti. So Vayikra, and called ha'adam, the man or the Adam, name of his wife. So even that part is backwards concerning the way we speak, right? It would be saying, and called Adam name of his wife. But we say, and Adam called his wife's name. So the way the Hebrew reads is backwards. So it can make sense to somebody who understands Hebrew that God, who is a wondrous advisor, a mighty God, an eternal Father, would call somebody's name something the way it reads. But let's say you don't understand Hebrew and you don't want to hear that because you're a Christian and that doesn't make sense to you. So we're going to go another route. A breakdown of these titles applied to the God of Israel. Wonderful Counselor, Isaiah 28 and 29. This also comes from the Lord of hosts, who is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. Mighty God, Genesis 49 and 24. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Everlasting Father, Isaiah 63 and 16. Doubtless you are our Father. Though Abraham was ignorant of us and Israel does not acknowledge us, you, O Lord, are our Father, our Redeemer from everlasting is your name. So if he is from everlasting, he would be an everlasting Father. Prince of Peace. This title is reserved for a king of Israel, a son of David, not the Most High. Now, why do I say a king if he's a prince, right? Why is this title reserved for a king of Israel if he's called a prince? Well, because they're a prince concerning their rank in connection to the Most High. Ezekiel 34:24. And I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David, a prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. Now we know David was a king of Israel, but concerning the Most High, he's a prince because he's under the Most High, right? Ezekiel 45:22. On that day, the prince shall prepare for himself and for all the people of the land a bull for a sin offering. So again, we see the prince, who's really the king, preparing for himself and the people a bull for a sin offering. So if that Prince of Peace or that prince was Jesus, why would he be preparing for himself and the people a sin offering? Because this ain't talking about Jesus. The Prince of Peace is not concerning Jesus. Put not your trust in princes. Psalm 146:3. Put not your trust in princes, in a son of man, in whom there is no salvation. So, if the Prince of Peace was Jesus, if the Son of Man is Jesus, you're not to trust him because there is no salvation with them. And why, if the Most High is a prince, would it tell you not to trust in a prince? Because it says in Psalm 118:9, it is better to trust the Lord than to put confidence in princes. You're not supposed to trust a prince. So if the Most High was this Prince of Peace, he's saying don't trust him. I can't make this up. The verse is on the screen. 1 Chronicles 5:20. And they were helped against them, and the Hagrites were delivered into their hand, and all who were with them, for they cried out to God in the battle. He heeded their prayer because they put their trust in him. If they were not supposed to put their trust in him, then why does it tell us to do that? Because he's not a prince. He's not a son of man. But he does give salvation, right? Because it says, delivered into their hand all who were with them, and they cried out to God in battle, right? They were helped against them, and the Hagrites were delivered into their hand. This means they got saved from the Hagrites, which means they got salvation. But if the Most High is a son of man or a prince, we're not supposed to trust him because there is no salvation there. So when people try to tell you to trust Jesus and call him the Son of Man and the Prince of Peace, we're not supposed to put no trust in the prince or in the Son of Man. They don't have no salvation, which is why Jesus didn't save nobody. He said, you're going to be killed for my name's sake. There's nothing physical in the New Testament where anybody got saved from anybody. I have a whole lecture on this. One on my page, how the New Testament changed the definition of a savior and salvation. And one on Debate Talk for You, shout out to Sal Showtime, called Saviors in the Tanakh. So, in context, don't trust in no prince, which means this prince cannot be the Most High because he's telling you not to trust the prince. Psalm 118:9. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. It cannot be any clearer than that. Wonderful Counselor, 2 Chronicles 32:30. It was Hezekiah who blocked the upper outlet of the Gihon spring and channeled the water down to the west side of the city of David. He succeeded in everything he took. Why? Because he was a wonderful counselor. So if you want to apply the names given in Isaiah 9:6 to somebody, let's apply them to Hezekiah. Because he was born to Ahaz right after Isaiah chapter 7, right? 2 Kings 20 and 20. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah with all his might. So that means he was mighty with all his might. And how he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? So you could say, well, it doesn't say mighty God right there. But guess what? The term God or El just means power, right? But it's also a judge. And Hezekiah, as a king, had the power to be a judge. Okay? And his name means the might of Yah, the strength of Yah, the power of Yah. That's what Hezekiah means. Chazak Yah. That's what his name means. Wonderful counselor. So we're going to see how Hezekiah was considered a wonderful counselor on top of all the things that I've shown before. So in Proverbs 25:1, these also are Proverbs of Solomon, which the man of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. So what this tells us is that the Proverbs of Solomon were orally transmitted all the way up until King Hezekiah. So from Solomon through all the kings of Judah, which were a few up until Hezekiah, was only taught orally. So those, there's plenty of people today who deny the oral Torah, where here's proof right here that Hezekiah had to copy out the Proverbs, which was great counsel. So that's why we have them today, and we don't have to rely on our grandfathers trying to remember them and tell us them in the oral tradition. 2 Chronicles 29 and 30. Moreover, Hezekiah the king and the princes commanded the Levites to sing praise unto the Lord with the words of David and Asaph the seer, and they sang praises with gladness, and they bowed their heads and worshipped. So we see through wise counsel that Hezekiah had the Levites singing the praises with the words of David, and of Asaph the seer, which would be our book of Psalms, right? So Hezekiah was using the Psalms to teach the people to sing praises to the Most High and to bow their heads and to worship the Most High. 2 Chronicles 30 and 22. And Hezekiah spake comfortably unto all the Levites that taught the good knowledge of the Lord. And they did eat throughout the feast 7 days, offering peace offerings and making confessions to the Lord, God of their fathers. So with wise counsel or wonderful counsel, Hezekiah basically spake comfortably unto the Levites that taught the good knowledge of the Lord. Why is it good to speak comfortably to the Levites? Because you want to have a good standing with the teachers of the Torah. Because remember, if you read in the law, the Levites were out throughout the whole land of Israel because they didn't have a specific inheritance, and they were the teachers. Remember in Deuteronomy chapter 17, where it tells us when you have a question between blood and plea and plea, or basically a very difficult question, you have to go to the judges, the priests who were Levites in those days. 2 Chronicles 32 and 8. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. The people were strengthened by the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So with his wisdom and counsel, Hezekiah was also considered one of the greatest kings of Judah. And with his wisdom and counsel, he was able to have the king of Assyria defeated when Israel basically had their backs up against the wall. So you can read more about the King Hezekiah, king of Judah, but he was definitely a wonderful counselor. Now, this can be a controversial topic if you are not familiar with the book of Isaiah, with the Hebrew language, or just scriptures in general. So, Manu, 5973, 36 occurrences. What does Manu mean? Emmanuel. With us is God, right? Look it up. Why am I bringing this to your attention? 5973 in the Strongs. Imanu, Emmanuel. Who can this be applied to? Isaiah 8 and 8. Again, Emmanuel. It's not one word. Emmanuel is not one word. Emmanuel. Emmanuel, right? Look it up. Isaiah's son, Emmanuel. From M and L with the pronominal suffix inserted with us is God. Emmanuel, a type of name of Isaiah's son. Emmanuel. Emmanuel of Hebrew origin. Emmanuel, God with us. Emmanuel, a name of Christ, which is not true because nobody called Jesus Emmanuel, because you would have to assume the word Christ would be associated with Jesus when there were many Christs or Messiahs in the Tanakh before Jesus, like Aaron and Solomon and David and any other priest or prophet that was anointed with oil, which what the word Christ and Messiah means, someone that was anointed with oil. But to stay on topic, it says a type of Isaiah's son, a type name of Isaiah's son. Hezekiah was a grandson of Isaiah. A lot of people don't know that because Isaiah was from the tribe of Judah. But we're going to stay on topic. Why is Emmanuel being spoken of right now? I'm going to show you. Again, in Isaiah 8 and 10, with us, God is. Imanu, with us, El, God is. 410 in the Strongs, 5973 in the Strongs, and Isaiah 8 and 10. So we see in Isaiah chapter 7 and Isaiah chapter 8, this word Emmanuel or Emmanuel, it just keeps repeating itself, right? Why is this? The Lord was with him. 2 Kings 18 and 7. Emo, 5973 in the Strongs. With him is Yahweh. We know we're not going to argue about how to pronounce the name of God. Right here on the screen says Yahweh. This is in Strong's Concordance. So with him was God. God is with us. We know a name of somebody is not necessarily the person themselves are not God, but it is an attribute of God. Like Isaiah means God is salvation. Okay? So we know Elijah means my God is Yah. So we're not saying that Elijah is our God Yah, but that's what his name means. So let's go a little further. Isaiah 8 and 10. Take counsel together, and it shall come to nothing. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us, or Emmanuel, right? Well, if God was with Hezekiah, then God was with us, because Hezekiah will be considered a part of us if we were in the nation of Israel when the king of Assyria came to destroy them, right? Okay, so let's go further. Isaiah 7 and 14. There's this word, Imanu, again, without the L, right? Because remember, it's not one word. So with us, right? Deuteronomy 5 and 2. With us. 1 Kings 8 and 57. Remember when Solomon dedicated the temple? It says, because God is with us. Imanu. So when we read about Emmanuel, it's telling you that God is with us throughout the scriptures. But somebody just happened to be called that in Isaiah 7 and 14. And it was pertaining to a prophecy to show that since God is with us, nothing bad is going to happen concerning the kings who planned on attacking Judah. Remember, it says, for this will not stand. So this is why Ahaz was not to worry, because the sign was given to Ahaz, because God is with us. This doesn't mean that that person was God with us. It just means the baby was a symbol or a sign to show that God was with us. Mighty God, Isaiah 9:6, right? For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. 23:96 in the Strongs, from Kazakh and Yah, strengthening of Jah, right? Or power of Jah, might, strength. These are all words symbolizing some type of might or power or strength, right? So Hezekiah is the strength of Yah. This will basically be saying he was a mighty God, not that he was a God, because remember, Moses was called a God in Exodus chapter 7, verse 1. He was a God unto Pharaoh. That doesn't mean he was God. It just means he had power. And Hezekiah, being the king, had power, right? Even in the NAS, Exhaustive Concordance, Yah has strengthened. That's what Hezekiah means. He had the might because the Most High was behind him or with him. Okay? Became mighty, NASB translation. So we can see these attributes all can be applied to Hezekiah. So I want to back up what I've been saying. Gods are judges, Exodus 7:1. So the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. Exodus 21:6. Then his master shall bring him to the judges. He shall also bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. That word for judges is the Elohim, the gods, because they have power and authority, as do the kings of Israel. Remember, Solomon was a judge. David brought justice to his people. He was a judge. Okay? The judges are Levites. They're also called judges or priests or gods. Why? Because they have power to rule and to make decisions. So a judge is not necessarily a deity when it's called an Elohim, but it's just some person who has a type of authority or of power. Gods are judges. John 10:34-35. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, I said you are gods? If he called them gods, to whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken. Excuse me. So if we see Jesus quoting Psalms, because we know this comes out of the book of Psalms, he called them gods. You are gods. He's talking about the judges of Israel. And he could also be referring to all judges in all lands, because all judges will be considered gods because they're the persons or person in authority of that specific place and time. 2 Samuel 8:15. And David reigned over all Israel, and David executed judgment and justice unto all his people. So if David executed judgment, he will be a judge, and we know judges are called gods, like I just showed you in Exodus. Psalm 122:5. For there are set thrones of judgment, the thrones of the house of David. So these would all be considered gods. And of course, they would be mighty gods because they would have to show their might by being kings or sons of David. We know David was a mighty warrior, right? So if David was a mighty warrior, he could also be called a mighty God. Remember, when one of David's sons was chasing after him, one of his advisors said, well, you know your dad is a mighty man. Some translations say he's a valiant man, and all his people is valiant too, meaning they knew David was a warrior. He was mighty. David was not just some armchair quarterback. David used to go out and fight battles. So again, a mighty God is not always necessarily a deity, but just a person of what power and authority, as David was. And if Hezekiah was a son of David who executed the same type of judgment in his land over Israel, he could also be called a mighty God. Mighty ones, Genesis 6:4. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Now, were these mighty men gods? We can argue if they're sons of God, were they angels, but they were mighty men. So when you see the term mighty, and the term mighty is not necessarily a god. It could just be somebody powerful. Okay? 2 Chronicles 27:6. So Jotham became mighty because he prepared his ways before the Lord his God. So if Jotham was a king, he would also be considered a god because he was a judge, like I've shown, but it tells you that he became mighty. So he could also be a mighty God in the context of his rulership. So you got to be very careful when you see certain words to always try to apply them to what you think it means. You got to put it in the context of what it's talking about in the verse. A mighty God does not have to be referring to a deity at all. Ma'olam, or from of old, 5769 in the Strong's NASB translation. Ages, all successive, always, ancient, ancient times, continual, days of old, eternal, eternity, ever, everlasting, everlasting, forever, forever and ever, forever, forevermore, lasting, long, long ago, long past, long time, never, old, permanent, permanently, perpetual, perpetually. So we see the many different uses of this word, olam, everlasting father. So how could Hezekiah be an everlasting father? Is he the father? Is he the Most High? No. Let's break it down. Abiyad, father of old, father of everlasting, right? So 5703 in the Strong's, everlasting father. 5703 is the word ad, perpetuity, old. Proverbs 29:14. The king that faithfully judges the poor, his throne should be established forever. So the king that faithfully judges, right? The king that is a god, right? Because he's a judge. He faithfully judges the poor. His throne should be established forever. And does that mean that that king is an eternal king or an everlasting king? That just means his throne will be established for a long time. That specific king will not live forever, but his throne would be established, like the Most High told David, if you and your sons obey me, you will always have a man on your throne. That doesn't mean each of you will live forever. It just means you will have a perpetual rulership. Okay? Forever. Brown Driver Briggs. A future time. La'ad. Usually la'ad is forever. During lifetime of king of others. So it can just be referring to a lifetime. So yeah, your throne is established forever in your lifetime. Just like David's throne was, God told him, I'm going to establish your throne forever. In David's lifetime, it was established forever in the context of it kept going. He's seen it go to his son Solomon. Psalm 21:7. For the king trusts in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High, he shall not be moved. Does that mean he's not going to die? Does that mean he's not going to pass on? No, it's just in his lifetime, okay, he is not going to lose his throne. Proverbs 12:19. The truthful lips shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. So if I'm speaking the truth, that doesn't mean I'm going to live forever. It just means what I have established is going to continue, okay, during a lifetime and beyond that, if of course people keep speaking the truth. So the word forever in the context of the Tanakh is not always how you would look at of something that doesn't ever end, especially when you're dealing with something that's subjective as a condition, like when the Most High told David, if your sons do such and such or keep my law, then your throne will be established forever. But they didn't do that. That's why there's nobody on the throne of David today. Had they done that, even though all those kings died, their throne would have been established forever. David's throne is everlasting. 2 Samuel 7:16. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. Psalm 89:29. His seed also I will make to endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. Psalm 89:36. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. 1 Kings 2:45. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So we see David and Solomon came and went, but the Most High promised that their throne would be established forever. Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. This is where this word father gets real interesting. 2 Kings 18:18. And when they had called to the king, there came out to them Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder. 2 Kings 18:37. Then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. So we're going to see why this is important, that we keep reading about Eliakim, who was over the household. What does that mean? Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, Isaiah 20:20-23. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with my robe and strengthen him with my girdle, and I will commit the government into his hand. And he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder. So he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. And I will fasten him as a nail in a sure place, and he shall be for a glorious throne to his father's house. Now, if I read this to an average Christian, and I took out the word Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and I asked them, who is this talking about? Who is going to be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem? I will commit thy government to his hand, to the house of Judah, the key of the house of David. He shall open and none shall shut. He shall shut and none shall open. I will fasten him as a nail. Oh, that's got to be Jesus. Not at all. Because if you remove words or omit things, you can make the scripture say whatever you want them to. The average Christian does not know who Eliakim was, and they don't know that he was a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. They don't know that because they're told that the Old Testament was for them, was for the people in the Old Testament. They even call it an Old Testament in the New Testament. The Torah is not the Old Testament. The Tanakh is not an Old Testament. It is simply scripture. It is what the Most High commanded all his prophets to write down. Excuse me. The only thing old about it is its antiquity. That doesn't mean it's outdated. Okay? So, if this person is called a father, and he's clearly not the father, he's not the Most High, he's a servant. Clearly says, I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. So it's telling you he even got a daddy. Okay? Eliakim has a daddy, but he's called a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he's got the key of the house of David on his shoulder. How is this possible? The reason I asked why Eliakim cannot be called father, when I said, how is this possible? How is he called father? Is because we're told in the New Testament that you can't do such things. You can't call Jesus father, so the everlasting father title would not apply to him according to Jesus. Matthew 23:9. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your father, he who is in heaven. So according to Jesus, you couldn't even call Jesus father because he wasn't in heaven when he said that, right? It says he who was in heaven, right? But clearly Eliakim was called the father of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Genesis 17:5. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. So if Abraham's name means father of many nations, you can't call him that, because you'd be calling somebody father on earth, and it's not the Most High, according to Jesus. Excuse me. So I don't know where Jesus is pulling this from, because he's clearly not reading the Tanakh. There's no law that says this, because Eliakim would not be called a father of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. What's going on here? So let's go into this word father some more. My father, 1 Samuel 24:11. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe and killed thee not. Know thou, and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine hand, and I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it. This is David calling Saul my father. Why? Because Saul was the king. So we see kings being called father. We know if Hezekiah was a king, somebody could have also called him my father. So what about everlasting father? Well, if you're speaking to him or speaking about him to someone, and you put it in the context of, like, let's say today, over 2,000 years ago, instead of saying the old father King Saul, or the Olam father, the father of old King Saul, you could easily translate that as an everlasting father. Does that mean that he never died? No. It just means he was ancient. So Hezekiah, being a father in the context of a king, being ancient or old, as far as we are concerned, if he's going to be called an everlasting father, it just means someone who lived long ago, who was considered like a father because he was a king. He had authority. He had respect. As clearly David had respect for Saul, his father, who wasn't really his father, but Saul was the king because David said over and over again, I will not touch the Lord's anointed. So David respected his father, the king, who wasn't really his father, King Saul. 2 Kings 6:21. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? So here we see the king of Israel calling the prophet my father. So even somebody who was called a father had even more respect for somebody who was a prophet and called him my father. So we see David, who was a Messiah, had respect for someone else who was a Messiah, who happened to be the king, and called him father. Now we see a Messiah who was the king of Israel, who saw a prophet and called him my father. Now we're going to escalate it. 2 Kings 13:14. Elisha had become sick with the illness of which he would die. Then Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over his face and said, oh, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. So twice Elisha is called father by a king of Israel. Let's go further. The father is not Jesus. Acts 1:6-7. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. So he's basically saying, you got to ask my dad, right? Matthew 20:23. So he said to them, you will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but is for those whom it is prepared by my Father. It is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father, not him. He doesn't have a say in this according to him. So he can't be the Father. 1 Corinthians 15:28. When all things are made subject to him, then the Son himself will also be subject to him who put all things under him, that God may be all in all. So if Jesus is subject to him, he cannot be him. If you're subject to your boss, obviously you are not the boss. Okay? So Jesus cannot be the everlasting Father. For one, according to him, you can't call him that, so that wouldn't be referring to him. For two, out his own mouth, he is not his Father. It's not his to give a specific position to certain people, because he said it's prepared by my Father, and he is subject to his Father according to him. Everlasting Father. Genesis 45:8. Now it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh and the Lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So if you're telling a story about Joseph, how he was a father to Pharaoh, he could be called an everlasting father because he is a father of old. He's an ancient father, not literally to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh clearly had respect and honor for Joseph, is why he put him in that position, right? Ezra 3:12. But many of the priests and Levites and chief of the fathers who were ancient men. Now, were they really ancient in those times? How we look at somebody 3,000 years old and say, oh, that was ancient? No, they just somebody who had respect from long ago. Even just older people could be considered like ancient because they have, it's just like talking to an elder. You got respect for these people. So when you see the word everlasting Father, it's not talking about living forever or being eternal. It's just like a stamp of respect. Even the word Father doesn't mean God or the Most High. And I showed you all the different translations of the word everlasting, because it just means from long ago or old. 2 Kings 11 and 12. Then it happened, as they continued on and talked, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with with horses of fire, and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven, and Elisha saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. So he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes and tore them into two pieces. So we seen earlier, the king of Israel, who could be considered a father, called Elisha my father. Now we see Elisha calling Elijah my father. Elijah wasn't the father of Elisha. He was his rabbi or his teacher or the prophet who anointed him, like his OG, right? So we see a prophet being called a father, and that prophet calling a different prophet my father. But didn't Jesus say, call no man on earth your father? Why is Joseph and kings and prophets calling each other, calling themselves fathers, or people calling them fathers without no problems? Because that's not the way it was taught in the Tanakh. That's new testimony. That's a new doctrine. Clearly nothing wrong with Joseph saying, God made me a father to Pharaoh. He says, God made me father, but God, he has made me a father to Pharaoh. Joseph didn't have a problem saying that. Elisha didn't have a problem calling Elijah my father. The king of Israel didn't have a problem calling Elisha his father. David didn't have a problem calling Saul his father. So where would Jesus come up with the doctrine of don't call no man on earth your father? That's why when you see everlasting father, you really don't know how to understand that, because you got New Testament glasses on. Jesus says, my Father and my God, while in heaven. John 14:28. You have heard me say to you, I am going away and coming back to you. If you love me, you would rejoice, because I said, I am going to the Father, for my Father is greater than I. If you're greater than someone, that means you are not that person. Revelation 3:5. He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. So here we see Jesus saying, I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. So we see while he was on earth, he says the Father is greater than I. While in heaven, because that's when Revelation was given, right? Supposedly when Jesus was already in heaven, he says, my Father and his angels. He should have said, my angels, and I will confess his name before myself, if he was the Father, right? Revelation 3:12. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. He shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which come down out of heaven from my God. And I will write upon him my new name. So if Jesus is getting a new name, and he's talking about my God, right? He's going to write upon him somebody in the temple. I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. He shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God. Well, that's not going to be his name, because he says, I will write upon him my new name. We know the Most High is not going to get a new name. It says in Exodus 3:15, this is my name forever. This is my name forever, from generation to generation. So if Jesus is talking about my Father and my God while in heaven, and the Father is greater than him, then guess what? he obviously is not the Father. The Father would never be a man. John 1:18. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. So if no one has seen God at any time, then that means no one has ever seen Jesus at any time if he was God, right? So for those who think Genesis 18 is Jesus in the flesh, John says no one has seen God at any time. Okay? Deuteronomy 4:15-16. Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. So if the Most High is telling you don't corrupt yourself and make an image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, why would he come to earth as a man in the likeness of a male and be worshipped if he said don't corrupt yourself by doing that with an image? But he's going to send a real physical living breathing image for you to worship? Doesn't make any sense. Romans 1:23. And change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. So if the image of man, or if the image made like corruptible man, Paul says that they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man. He's saying that that's not the right thing to do. And if the Holy Spirit came down in the form of a dove, it says right here, made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. So they changed the glory of God into images of man and birds. Corruptible images, right? Into an image made like corruptible man and birds. So Jesus being a man and the Holy Spirit looking like a dove, you would be changing the glory of the incorruptible God into an image. Paul says you can't do that for those who listen to Paul. Hosea 11:9. I will not execute the fierceness of my anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come with terror. So if I am God and not a man, remember in Psalm 146 where it says, do not put your trust in a son of man? So the Most High says, I am not a man. I am God and not man. Numbers 23:19. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man. Again, Psalm 146 tells you, don't put your trust in princes, nor in a son of man. Clearly, this cannot be Jesus being the Father, because he calls himself a son of man, and God said he's not a son of man. And we know the scripture where it says the Most High don't change. So we don't even have to go there. Is the son of David the Father, aka the God of Israel? Luke 1:32, he shall be great. He should be called the Son of the Highest. Not the highest, but the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. So is the Most High going to give him the throne of his father David? Who's him? Is this referring to God himself? Is this referring to Jesus? Because when it says the throne of his father David, who is David the father of? Jesus or God? David clearly can't be the father of the Most High, could he? Because it says he will be called the Son of the Highest. David was a son of the highest, right? David is called a prince by the Most High, which would be a lower term than the king. We know David is called a son of God. He shall be my father. I will be his father. He will be my son. Right? Read Psalm 89. He shall call me father. And referring to Solomon, it says, he shall be my son. I shall be his father. So if Solomon was the son of God, clearly David was the son of God. So when it says the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David, is this referring to God himself is going to be given the throne of his father David? No. Psalm 89, 29 through 32. His seed also I will make to endure forever. His seed, right? And his throne as the days of heaven. If his children forsake my law and will not walk in my judgments, if they break my statutes and will not keep my commandments, then I will visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. This is clearly talking about David and his sons, because it says, if his children forsake my law, which would mean they have the capacity to sin. So is God going to be in the league of people who have the capacity to sin? If they break my laws, if they break my statutes, if they forsake my law, then I will visit their transgression. Because this is talking about David's children. So will the Most High be in the same league of David's children? Of course not. 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 14. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers. So David has fathers. The Most High calls David's fathers fathers. When Jesus said, don't call nobody on earth your father, the Most High said David has fathers. He didn't have no problem telling David he has fathers. I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, which means come out of your body, not from heaven, but out of thy bowels. And I will establish his kingdom, not my kingdom, his kingdom, which because it's on earth, not in heaven. He shall build a house for my name, nobody else's name. Jesus didn't build a house for nobody. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of man and with the stripes of the children of men. This clearly implies he will have the capacity to sin, because it says, if he commit iniquity, I'm going to punish him. Okay? I will be his father, and he shall be my son. This is clearly Solomon, because it says he's going to build a house for my name. Solomon fulfilled this in the book of Kings. And Solomon came from the bowels of David. He was his seed. I will set up thy seed after thee. After thee. Solomon came after David. Okay? Solomon built a temple. Solomon committed iniquity. But guess what? Solomon was still the son of God. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. The condition just was, if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him, right? So, the sons of David are not the God of Israel. Is God a son of David? I am the root and the offspring of David. Revelation 22:16. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. So, is God, the Most High, the Father, the Holy One of Israel, the offspring of David? No. Romans 1 and 3. Concerning his son, Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh. Not even Paul thought, in Romans at least, because we know Paul contradicts himself, that Jesus was the Father, because he said he was the seed of David according to the flesh. Jeremiah 33 and 22. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured, so I will multiply the seed of David, my servant, and the Levites that minister unto me. So, if the Most High is going to multiply the seed of David, his servant, the seeds of David would also be his servants, which would mean if the Most High was the seed of David, he would be his own servant. Does that make any sense? So no, God is not the offspring of David. David's sons are the offspring of David, but David is not the father of the Most High. It is not in heaven. What's not in heaven? Deuteronomy 30:11-14. For this commandment which I command thee this day, it is not hidden from thee, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven, that thou shouldst say, who shall go up for us to heaven and bring it to us, and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea, that thou shouldest say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very nigh unto thee, in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. So, if it is not in heaven, that means we didn't need anybody to bring it down from heaven for us to understand it or to do it or keep it or any of those things clearly written in Deuteronomy 30. For this commandment which I command thee this day is not hidden from thee, meaning it's not a mystery to you, neither is it far off. You don't have to go searching for it. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to wait for it. It is not in heaven. So if in Deuteronomy Jesus was in heaven waiting to be born 1,000 years later, the commandment which you were told to do was not there. It says, but the word is very nigh unto you in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. You didn't have to wait for nobody to bring it from heaven because it wasn't there. Read Deuteronomy 30. So where is the throne of David? Because when Jesus came to earth, he did not sit on the throne of David. And when he died, he did not go or ascend to the throne of David. And when he supposedly returns, he's not going to sit on the throne of David. Why do I say that? Because he said that after the resurrection, nobody will be given in marriage and nobody will have children. But the Most High clearly said David's throne will be established forever and his seed will continue forever. Jesus is not going to do that, which means he's not going to sit on David's throne. So, what happened when Jesus was on earth? John 6:15. Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, which would be giving him the throne of David, right? He departed again to the mountain by himself alone. He didn't want it. He ran. He departed. They were about to make him the king. If that was his purpose to be the king, then he didn't want it when it was time to take it, right? So the Christian will say exactly, it wasn't his time. You know, he didn't come to be the king of Israel. He didn't come to sit on the throne of David. He came to die for your sins. But what did Luke 32 say? You're going to have a son. He's going to be called the Son of the Highest, and God will give him the throne of his father David. So why, when the people wanted him to be king, he didn't want to be the king? So when Jesus says, my kingdom is not from hence, what does that mean? Some translations say, my kingdom is not of this world. 2889 in the Strong's Cosmos, definition, order, the world, usage of the world, universe, worldly affairs, the inhabitants of the world, adornment. John 18:36, Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. So where is David's throne? Where did Solomon build that temple? Because that's where he says, I'm going to establish your throne forever, right? Your son's going to build a house for my name, and I'm going to establish his throne forever. Wasn't that in Jerusalem? So when Jesus is telling Pilate, my kingdom is not from hence, and that's not the throne of David, which means you not the son of David, who was supposed to fulfill the prophecy in Luke 132. Go read Luke 132 and tell me where is that throne at that he was supposed to receive from his father David. Where is that throne at? Is it not from hence, or was it in Jerusalem? Where is David's throne? 2 Samuel 5 and 12. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. Where was that? The kingdom of Israel is from hence. It is on earth. The Lord established him as king over Israel. That's where his throne was. 1 Kings 2:12. Then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Where is that? Is it not from hence? Or is it right here on earth? Well, at the time, right? Psalm 122 and 5. For thrones are set there for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Where were the thrones of the house of David? They were in Israel, on earth. Or were they not from hence? Like Jesus said, his kingdom was not from hence. Y'all got to read these things. I'm not making them up. I will set upon your throne the fruit of your body. Is the Most High the fruit of David's body? No. Psalm 132 and 11. The Lord has sworn in truth to David. He will not turn from it. I will set upon the throne, your throne, the fruit of your body. Ezekiel 37, 24 through 25. My servant, David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. Then they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob, my servant. What? Dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob, my servant. Was that not from hence? Or is that in Israel? Where your fathers dwelt. There's the word fathers that you're not supposed to call nobody. And where they dwelt. So where is Jesus' kingdom? And they shall dwell there, they, their children, and their children's children forever. So how can Jesus sit on David's throne that is not from hence and tell you that nobody's going to get married and have children if the Most High just says, David, my servant, shall be king over them? Now, just to clarify, David is just like saying the house of David, not David literally himself, but someone from the house of David who's going to be king, right? They are going to dwell in the land where he gave, the land that he gave to Jacob his servant, where your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell there, they and their children and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. It doesn't say, I'm going to be your prince forever. The Most High said, David shall be their prince forever, which means the Most High is not the Prince of Peace in Isaiah 9 and 6. So hopefully this is becoming very clear. The reason I went into all these things about David and his throne is to show you Jesus never sat on the throne, and he never intended to sit on the throne of David, because he said that's not his kingdom. I will set on your throne the fruit of your body. Somebody from David's body, not somebody who's from heaven. Somebody divine, no. Somebody who even has the capacity to sin, because earlier when I read in Ezekiel, when it says the prince will give a sacrifice for himself and the people. Clearly that prince is given a sin sacrifice. Well, that clearly couldn't be Jesus according to the New Testament doctrine, could it? Well, that means Hebrews was a lie, and everybody in the New Testament who said Jesus didn't sin are liars. Because why would he be given a sin sacrifice for himself if he didn't require one? So, again, Hezekiah is a son of David, right? He was from his body, right? He is called a prince because most of the kings of Israel, not most, all the kings of Israel are princes are considered princes in the eyes of the Most High. If he's clearly calling David a prince, that means all David's sons will be princes, even though they're kings to us, they're a prince to the Most High, right? As far as rank goes. So, I will set upon your throne the fruit of your body. Did Jesus sit upon the throne of David? Nope. The throne of David, Isaiah 9:7. For the throne of David and his kingdom. For the throne of David and his kingdom. This can't be talking about Jesus based on everything that I just read. Jesus said his kingdom ain't from here. Right? Luke 1:32, he shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give him the throne of his father David. Jesus didn't sit on that throne. Now, what did Jesus say about being David's son? Matthew 22:45. If David then called him Lord, how is he his son? So this is concerning Psalm 110. I have a whole lesson on Psalm 110 on YouTube. Check it out. Psalm 110 and the Kings of Righteousness is what it's called. So, and I have a book on Amazon.com, Psalm 110 and the Kings of Righteousness. So if Jesus is telling you that if David called him Lord, how is he his son? He's telling you that he ain't a son of David. Because he's trying to say that David called him Lord. Which is completely bogus, but because Jesus himself said nobody knew the Son except the Father. And we know nobody knew anything about Jesus. Read Psalm 73. It says, there's no one in heaven I have but you. Talking about the Most High, right? The Most High says, I by myself made heaven and earth. I swear by myself, as I live forever, I created the heavens and the earth by my hand, by my power, by my wisdom. I never said, oh, and I'll let my son help me. Doesn't say that anywhere. So David wouldn't have been calling anybody in heaven his Lord except the Most High. And if David referred to the Most High as his Father, then clearly Jesus said don't call him Father because only God was the Father in heaven and Jesus was on earth when he said that. So the throne of David has nothing to do with Jesus. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Isaiah 9:7. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Now remember, there are conditions. Deuteronomy 28:13, and the Lord will make you the head and not the tail, and you should be above only and not be beneath, if you heed the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, and be careful to observe them. Excuse me. So we know that when it says, of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. It wouldn't have been no end if Israel would have continued in obeying the Most High, but they didn't do that. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom. Where is David's kingdom? On earth. Jesus says his kingdom is not of this earth. So Isaiah 9:6 and 7 was not referring to Jesus once again. The kingdom has conditions to be met to continue. 1 Kings 2, 1-4. Now the days of David drew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as written in the law of Moses. It don't say the Old Testament. It says in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. It doesn't call the law a curse, as we see in the New Testament. And that the Lord may fulfill his word, which he spoke concerning me. Who's me? Is David saying, if your sons, not my sons, well, we know everybody's a son of God, but specifically speaking, it's talking to David and his seed. If your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Where's the throne of Israel? In Israel. Where's the throne of David? In Israel. Jesus said his kingdom is not from hence. Can't be talking about him. It's not talking about the throne of David. When Jesus is talking about his kingdom and all this stuff, he's telling Pilate, my kingdom is not from here. Well, clearly you're not the one that we was looking for, because you're supposed to sit on David's throne. And Herod was the king of Judah. So really Herod was sitting on the throne that Jesus was supposed to sit on. But when they wanted to make Jesus king, he ran. Remember in John? He didn't want it. So, the Christians will say, well, it wasn't his time. Well, it wasn't, because he wasn't the person for it. So clearly it wasn't his time. If you carefully obey, remember there's conditions to this, Deuteronomy 6:25, then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us. Leviticus 26:14. But if you do not obey me and do not observe all these commandments, we know there's consequences, right? Deuteronomy 15:5. Only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God to observe with care all these commandments which I command you today, then you will prosper and get the blessings and all these things. But it clearly tells you, if you don't, you're going to have to pay a price. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Isaiah 37:30-35. And this shall be a sign unto thee. You shall eat this year such as groweth of itself. Now, before I continue, it says, this shall be a sign unto thee. Remember in Isaiah 7, it says, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Who is he talking to? Ahaz. That means it's had to be something he could see, not something that he's not going to see. He says, I'm going to give you a sign, which means I'm going to prove it to you. So that means that baby had to have been born where Ahaz could see it and witness the sign. Or it's not a sign. A sign is something you can see. If there's no stop signs, then I can't stop because I don't know where to stop, right? Because I don't see it. So when it says, and this shall be a sign to thee, you shall eat this year such as groweth of itself, meaning they're going to witness this. And the second year, that which bringeth of the same. And in the third year, sow ye and reap and plant vineyards and eat the fruit thereof. And the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go forth the remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Therefore, thus said the Lord concerning the king of, you guessed it, Assyria. He shall not come into the city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shields, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return. He shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. For I will defend the city to save it from mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. For my own sake and for my servant David's sake. What's going on? The king of Assyria is running his mouth, and the Most High is going to deal with him. Again, Isaiah and the book of Kings are telling the same stories concerning the king of Assyria threatening Judah. They got a hold of the northern tribes, right? They took them. But Judah didn't fall to Assyria. Judah fell to Babylon and the Romans and the Greeks. But the 10 tribes, the northern tribes, they got dealt with by Assyria. So again, Isaiah is giving you insight to how bad things were concerning the king of Assyria and how he was a major threat to the kings of Judah. Not he, but all the kings of Assyria was a threat to Judah and Israel for a very long time. I know a lot of Christians rely on the Septuagint to clean up a lot of things that they don't like to deal with. So let's go into the Septuagint. Britain Septuagint translation, Isaiah 9, 1 through 8. Drink this first. Act quickly, O land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, and the rest inhabiting the seacoast, and the land beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. O people walking in darkness, behold a great light. Ye that dwell in the region and shadow of death, a light shall shine upon you. The multitude of the people which thou hast brought down in thy joy, they shall even rejoice before thee as they rejoiced in harvest, and as they divide the spoil, because the yoke that was laid upon them has been taken away, and the rod that was on their neck, for he has broken the rod of the exactors, as in the day of Madian. For they shall compensate for every garment that has been acquired by deceit, and all raiment with restitution, and they shall be willing, even if they were burnt with fire. For a child is born to us, and a son is given to us, whose government is upon his shoulder, and his name is called the Messenger of Great Counsel. For I will bring peace upon the princes, and health to him. His government shall be great, and of his peace there is no end. It shall be upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom to establish it, and to support it with judgment and with righteousness, hence from henceforth and forever. The seal of the Lord of hosts shall perform this. The Lord has sent death upon Jacob, and it has come upon Israel. Now, that sounds a little different than what we've been reading so far. So let's deal with this. Isaiah 9 and 8, 1611 KJV versus the Brenton Septuagint. 1611 says, the Lord has sent a word into Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. The Brenton Septuagint, Isaiah 9 and 8 says, the Lord has sent death upon Jacob, and it has come upon Israel. So if the Lord sent death upon Jacob and it came upon Israel, what does Isaiah 9 and 8 have to do with Isaiah 9, 6 through 7 if it's talking about Jesus? The Lord has sent death upon Jacob, and it has come upon Israel. Did death come upon Israel in the New Testament, or were they saved by Jesus? I'm going to let y'all drink that one slow. Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Now this is the 1611 KJV. I'm going to stop at the end of verse 6. Now I'm going to read Isaiah 9 and 6 in the Britain Septuagint. For a child is born to us, and a son is given to us, whose government is upon his shoulder, and his name is called the Messenger of Great Counsel, for I will bring peace upon the princes and health to him. It's missing wonderful counselor or wonderful counselor. It says messenger of great counsel. So if it's using the word messenger, it would really be an angel or a malak of great counsel if it's using that word malak for messenger. Maybe not, just saying. But it's clearly missing the mighty God. It's missing the everlasting Father. And it's missing the Prince of Peace. But it does say, I will bring peace upon the princes and health to him. So who are the princes and who needs health? Did Jesus need health? If Jesus was healing people, why would he need help? He needed to be resurrected? Is that what you're going to say? So God needed to be brought back to life, even though he says in Deuteronomy, as I live forever? So now let's do it, verse 7. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Isaiah 9 and 7 in the Septuagint. His government shall be great, and of his peace there is no end. It shall be upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to establish it and to support it with judgment and with righteousness from henceforth and forever. The seal of the Lord of hosts shall perform this. So, some of it's the same, but some major differences. There is no mighty God, there is no everlasting Father, and there is no Prince of Peace. Doesn't say that in the Septuagint. And if you go back and read the slide before, there's some other things that is said in that Septuagint that are not here as well. We're going to backtrack a little bit. Isaiah 9 and 4, the rod of his oppressor. For you have broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. Isaiah 10:24. Therefore, thus says the Lord God of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not be afraid of, guess who? The Assyrian. He shall strike you with the rod and lift up his staff against you in the manner of Egypt. Now, what did Egypt do? Egypt was oppressive to Israel and destroyed, right? But Rome was oppressive to Israel and they continued. Isaiah 9 has nothing to do with Jesus or the Romans, because the rod of the oppressor was the Assyrian. This is why Matthew edited Isaiah 9, because he didn't want to talk about the people oppressing and distressing and vexing the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Is why he just starts the verse, the land of Naphtali and the land of Zebulun, right? What about them? Doesn't tell you what they're going through or why they were in darkness, because he had to paint a picture to include Jesus. The rod of his oppressor. Let's get some context. 2 Chronicles 31-6. And Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel. For the king had taken counsel, and his princes and all the congregation in Jerusalem, to keep the Passover in the 2nd month. For they could not keep it at that time, because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently. Neither had the people gathered themselves together to Jerusalem, and the thing pleased the king and all the congregation. So they established a decree to make proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem, for they had not done it for a long time in such sort as it was written. So the posts were the post went with the letters from the king and his princes throughout all Israel and Judah, and according to the commandment of the king, saying, Ye children of Israel, turn again unto the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and he will return to the remnant of you that are escaped out of the hand of the kings of Assyria. These are the people who have been oppressing Israel over and over from Isaiah 7 all the way through Isaiah 10. They've been a thorn in their side. So when you read Isaiah chapter 9 and you take it out of context and you think it's referring to what Matthew's telling you in Matthew 4, 12 through 16, you got it all wrong. It's completely out of context. The historical context is completely wrong because you take out the kings of Assyria and you want to replace them with the time frame of the Romans, which simply do not fit. But guess who's also dealing with the Assyrians in this time frame? Hezekiah. Yes. And guess what? God was with him. Yes. That after him was none like him. So let's deal with how great was Hezekiah. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, or Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor who were before him. So we see the props given to Hezekiah is why he could be referred to as a wonderful counselor, a mighty God, an everlasting Father, and we're going to see him being a Prince of Peace. The Prince of Peace, 2 Kings 20:19. So Hezekiah said to Isaiah, the word of the Lord which you have spoken is good, for he said, will there not be peace and truth, at least in my days? So if he was a prince, like David was called a prince, there will be peace and truth in my days. So he would clearly be a Prince of Peace. 2 Chronicles 30:22. And Hezekiah gave encouragement to all the Levites who taught the good knowledge of the Lord. And they ate throughout the feast 7 days, offering peace offerings and making confessions to the Lord God of their fathers. Why are they making peace offerings? Why? Micah 5:5. And this man shall be the peace when the Assyrians shall come into our land. And when he shall tread in our places, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes of men. Who gave Israel peace when the Assyrian came into their land? Matthew 10:34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. So how are you calling Jesus the Prince of Peace when he said that's not what he came for? Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. Who else rocks the sword? Esau. You shall live by your sword. You came out with the sword against your brother. This is what it says, right? And Edom came out with a sword against Israel. Go read when Israel came up out of Egypt and they was trying to pass to the land. They said no. They said no, you can't come through our land. We don't care if you want to pay us for the water and all that stuff. It says they came out with swords against Israel and Israel turned away. So Jesus is talking to these people like he's not wanting to give them peace. That's not what he came for. He came to bring a sword. So how you call him a prince of peace when he out his own mouth said that's not what he about? Conclusion. 2 Chronicles 30 and 18. For a multitude of the people, even many of Ephraim and Manasseh, Issachar and Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves, yet did they eat the Passover otherwise than it was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, the good Lord, pardon everyone. So we see Hezekiah with his wonderful counsel, with his might, being a prince of peace, being a God in the sense of a judge who had power as a king. He prayed for them, saying, the good Lord pardon everyone. And guess what? Go and read 2 Chronicles chapter 30 for yourself and see what happened. Did his prayer work? It's kind of a cliffhanger. We see Hezekiah was born to bring Israel together and get from under the yoke of Assyria. Go and read everything you can about the king named Hezekiah, what his name means, what he did, all his counsel, his might, and how and when he was born, what happened concerning the king of Assyria, the kings of Assyria, who wanted to destroy Israel even before he was born, and how Israel did not fall to Assyria. Israel, or Judah to be specific, because Israel was taken into captivity by Assyria. But Judah, because it was different, because Judah was ruled by Hezekiah, and they, after Hezekiah's death, fell into the hands of the king of Babylon, not Assyria. Conclusion. Matthew 4 gives another false fulfillment citation. Matthew's false doctrine of the virgin birth in Matthew chapter 1, and the entire chapter 2 of Matthew are false fulfillment citations. Check out the false fulfillment citation series on my YouTube page, and you will see over and over when it says this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. It's always not the case when you go and review what's going on. Jesus is not in these prophecies. The prophet is not speaking about him. He is inserted in there. Of course, when words are omitted and context is not there, you can make things say whatever you want. But you got to study on your own and go back and read on your own and verify, fact check, all the above, and see what's really going on.